Welcome back to my channel. Tonight I'm sharing a story unlike anything you've probably heard before. It didn't come from a classic horror book or a ghost hunting expedition. It started on a tech forum. Yeah, one of those places where people usually talk about computers, gadgets, and software. But this post was different. A guy, anonymous and hesitant, asked for advice on how to scan film negatives at home. Seems simple enough, right? But his post was oddly vague. There was no background, no excitement about the photos themselves, just a quiet, almost nervous request. It was like he was trying to keep something hidden. Within a few hours, that post disappeared, deleted, erased like it never existed. Most people would have forgotten about it. But one forum user, maybe a bit more curious or suspicious than most, archived it just in time. And what was saved is chilling. Tonight, I'm going to share with you exactly what that post said, word for word. So, sit back, turn off the lights, and get ready to hear the last photo on the disposable camera. Liam's life was a quiet rhythm, measured and undisturbed. His small attic apartment, nestled beneath the slanted roof of an old brownstone, was a world of muted colors and soft shadows. The walls were lined with bookshelves sagging under the weight of well-thumbed novels and old vinyl records. A single desk lamp cast a warm golden glow over his cluttered workspace, where he spent hours tapping away at his laptop. Most days were uneventful, the kind that blended into one another like pages in a diary. But every weekend, Liam indulged in a passion that felt like a secret rebellion against the sterile normalcy of his routine. Thrifting. The thrill of digging through forgotten junk piles, estate sales, and flea markets was his way of connecting with histories and lives long past. One particularly chilly Saturday, the air sharp and crisp with the promise of early fall, Liam found himself wandering a sprawling flea market set up behind a derelict strip mall. The ground was littered with fallen leaves, and the faint smell of damp earth mixed with old leather and musty paper. Amidst the chaos of cracked porcelain figurines, rusted tools, and yellowed postcards, his gaze landed on a battered cardboard box shoved under a rickety table. Something about it pulled him closer. Reaching in, his fingers brushed over an object half buried in a jumble of tangled wires and broken toys, an old Kodak disposable camera. The camera was a relic from another era. Its plastic casing, once bright yellow, was now dulled and stained by time. The edges were rough, chipped in places, the small viewfinder scratched but intact. Most intriguing of all, the film inside hadn't been removed. Liam lifted it carefully, turning it over in his hands as if it might whisper its secrets to him. He looked up at the woman behind the stall. Her face was etched with years of quiet hardship, eyes tired but gentle. "That came from my husband's things," she said softly, voice thick with memory. "He passed away last year. We found it tucked away in the attic during the cleanup. I don't know much else about it. It was just sitting there." Liam nodded, the weight of her words settling on him. He slipped a dollar bill across the table, took the camera, and carefully wrapped it in an old scarf from his bag. Later that evening, the quiet of his apartment felt different. The camera sat on his desk, strange and out of place among the modern clutter. Curiosity gnawed at him until finally he gathered his coat and stepped out into the cool night air, making his way to Still Frame Lab, one of the rare places still developing film the old-fashioned way. The lab was tucked between a boarded-up bookstore and a dimly lit cafe, its window fogged from the inside, faintly glowing under the streetlight. Inside, the smell of chemicals and warm paper greeted him, mingling with the soft hum of ancient machines. The technician took the camera with a knowing look, nodding silently. As Liam left, the camera's secrets locked inside that tiny roll of film, he couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone had been waiting for him to find it. 3 days had passed since Liam dropped off the camera, and the film was already starting to feel like a ghost he couldn't shake. He tried to focus on his work, but an uneasy curiosity nagged at the edges of his mind. Then, one quiet evening, his phone buzzed sharply from the other room. It was a voicemail from Rob at Stillframe Lab. Liam sat down, the room suddenly colder as he hit play. "Hi, Liam. This is Rob from Stillframe Lab." The voice sounded hesitant, almost strained. "We finished developing your film, but there's something unusual. One photo. The last one. It's not like the others. It's missing the timestamp and, well, it's different. Honestly, I'm not sure how to explain it over the phone. It's better if you come down here and see for yourself." Rob's voice cracked slightly on the last word, as if whatever he'd seen on that film unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Liam's heart began to pound. A cold knot tightened in his stomach. Questions raced through his mind. What could be so strange about a single photo? Had the camera been tampered with? Was it some kind of prank? Without wasting a moment, Liam grabbed his coat and headed out into the chilly night. The streets were quiet, lit only by flickering street lamps and the occasional passing car. He walked briskly to the photo lab, a small, inconspicuous building, nestled between a closed bookstore and an old cafe, its windows fogged with condensation. Inside, the familiar scent of chemicals and paper filled the air, but tonight the atmosphere felt heavier, charged with something Liam couldn't place. Rob was waiting behind the counter, holding a thin, plain envelope sealed with a sticker. "There's something you need to see for yourself," Rob said softly, avoiding Liam's gaze. He slid the envelope across the counter. Liam's hand shook slightly as he picked it up, the weight of the moment settling over him like a shadow. He glanced at Rob, who gave a subtle nod, a silent warning, or maybe just a quiet acknowledgement of the unknown. Taking a deep breath, Liam prepared himself for whatever lay inside. That afternoon, Liam stepped back into Stillframe Lab. The familiar scent of fixer chemicals and aged paper filled the cramped room, mingling with a faint, lingering scent of old leather from the dusty shelves. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an almost unnatural pallor over everything. Rob stood quietly behind the counter, holding a thin, fragile envelope that seemed almost too delicate to touch. He slid it across the glass with a subtle hesitation, eyes avoiding Liam's. Taking a deep breath, Liam peeled open the envelope, careful not to crease the photographs inside. His hands trembled slightly, the quiet hum of the lab machines suddenly feeling ominous. One by one, he pulled out the prints. The first few photos were faded and blurred, ghostly fragments of a life long past, a backyard dotted with fluttering party decorations, the blurry faces of children frozen in a moment of laughter beneath the afternoon sun. A man smiling awkwardly beside a rusty barbecue grill, the heat haze shimmering in the background, shots of empty streets and quiet parks, as though time had slipped away from them years ago. But then, the last photograph. Liam's breath hitched, his eyes locking onto the image like a magnet. It was his bedroom. Not just any bedroom, but his. The slanted ceiling he'd cursed on cold mornings, the crooked desk piled with books and papers, the old bookshelf lined with his collection of worn novels. Every detail was unmistakable. And there, in the center of the frame, lay a figure in bed. It was him, fast asleep. The photo was grainy and dark, the only light coming from a faint glow filtering through the window, casting long shadows across the room. No flash had been used. This was a quiet, unobserved moment. Liam's heart hammered in his chest. The angle of the shot, taken from inside the room, meant whoever had snapped it had been there, watching him. The room suddenly felt suffocating, the silence pressing in around him like a physical weight. His eyes darted to Rob, searching for answers, but the lab tech's face was pale, tense. Liam's mind raced. Had someone broken in? Was this a cruel prank? But the camera was old, the film decades out of date. It didn't add up. His fingers clenched the photo, knuckles white. "This can't be real," he whispered, voice shaking. But the photo told a different story. It was a window into his private world, invaded, observed, and recorded without his knowledge. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint buzz of the overhead lights and the quiet thud of Liam's heartbeat echoing in his ears. Liam sat at his kitchen table, the photo spread out in front of him like a silent accusation. He ran a shaky hand through his hair and muttered to himself, "It's probably photoshopped." The words felt hollow, even to his own ears. But that theory crumbled as he carefully pulled the physical negative from the envelope. This wasn't a digital file that someone could have easily manipulated on a computer. It was an actual piece of film, decades old, with a unique texture and faint scratches, imperfections that told a story of time and wear. There was no way to fake something like this without access to specialized equipment and a dark room. Still, he had to be sure. That night, Liam set up his own scanner and digitized the negative himself. His fingers trembled as the image slowly appeared on his screen. The same grainy bedroom, the same sleeping figure, unmistakably him. He stared at it for what felt like hours, willing himself to see a trick of the light, a flaw in the process. But there was nothing. It was exactly as it had been printed. Panic began to edge in. He tore his apartment apart, searching every corner for any sign of intrusion. Every drawer, every closet, every crevice was upended. But there were no footprints, no broken locks, no signs of forced entry. Nothing was missing. No disturbance at all. Yet the photo told a different story, one that chilled him to his core. Desperate to protect himself, he changed all the locks on his doors and windows. Then he invested in a cheap security camera, one that promised motion detection and cloud storage. He mounted it discreetly in the corner of his bedroom, hoping it might catch something, anything, that could explain the impossible photo. Despite all this, he tried to convince himself it was just a prank. Some elaborate joke by a stranger with too much time and too little scruples. In an attempt to trace the camera's origins, Liam called the woman who'd sold it to him. Her voice was soft, tinged with sadness. "Oh, that camera? It's been in a box in my attic for years," she said slowly. "Probably belonged to my husband. He passed away some time ago." Her words hung heavy in the air. No one else had touched the camera. No one had used the film in decades. And yet, here was a photo taken inside Liam's bedroom, of him sleeping peacefully, captured from an angle only possible if someone had been there, watching. The impossible truth pressed in from all sides, but Liam clung stubbornly to denial, trying to push back the growing dread that was starting to consume him. That night sleep refused to come. Liam lay in bed, eyes wide open, the weight of the photograph still heavy on his chest, metaphorically and almost physically. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window made him flinch. But it was the closet that held his attention. Not because it was open. It wasn't. Not because it made a sound. It didn't. It was because of the angle. The photo, the one from the camera, had been taken from that exact corner, from inside the room, at about chest height. Just far enough to see the whole bed. Just far enough to make sure it captured him. He stared at the door of that closet for what felt like hours, mind unraveling. He hadn't been able to shake the feeling that someone, or something, had stood right there, in the dark, watching him sleep. At 3:12 a.m., his phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the silence like a gunshot. The screen lit up. A push notification from the motion sensor app tied to his new security camera. "Motion detected. Bedroom." His breath caught in his throat. With trembling hands, he tapped the alert. There was only one frame. One single image. No video. No series of clips. Just one still photo, captured the moment the camera had detected movement. He stared at the screen in stunned silence. In the image, standing in the exact same spot where the original photo had been taken, right there, in the dark corner of his bedroom, was a tall, unmoving silhouette. Featureless, human in shape. But somehow, off. The figure was blacker than the shadows around it, as if it wasn't simply standing in the darkness, but was the darkness. No face, no outline of clothing, just a suggestion of a head, shoulders, arms, unmoving, watching. His hand hovered over the screen, unwilling to look away but terrified of what he was seeing. He felt cold, not chilled, but invaded, violated, like the very air in the room had shifted and thickened, like he was no longer alone. Liam sat frozen in place, staring at the screen. No sound, no movement. Just that awful image, captured at 3:12 a.m., with him lying in that same bed, unaware, just like before. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. Liam vanished without warning. His apartment sat untouched for weeks before the landlord finally entered. The bed was still made, a few clothes in the closet, coffee mug in the sink. But his phone was gone. So were the photos. Only the security camera remained, unplugged, facing the wall. No signs of struggle, no note, no calls made, as if he had simply stepped out of frame. Some say the image that captured the figure in his room has surfaced again, posted anonymously, blurred, distorted, but familiar. Always the same silhouette, standing in the shadows of someone else's bedroom. Sometimes the figure appears in new places, different homes, different beds, different victims. The image never changes, but the timestamp does. It's always recent, always within the past week. As if it's still happening. And those who see the photo, those who really see it, often report the same thing afterward. The feeling that someone is watching them at night. The sense that they've been photographed without knowing. that something is now standing just out of view, waiting. If you ever find an old disposable camera at a thrift store, leave it there. Some memories don't belong to the living. Some aren't memories at all. They're warnings.